the iTuesdays and Friday journey. And we're so happy to have him back again. We missed you a lot, Graeme. Today, you'll be talking about generational gaps, boomers versus zoomers.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And for those of you who are joining us while we were all chatting, you've got a sense of the type of vibe we want to have for this hour together this morning. In fact, we've got a panel discussion coming up later that's part of this, where we just get to hear something of the experience and insights of some of the younger and older team members. But before we do that, let me just give you a little introduction to generational theory. And I'll promise I won't make it boring. This is a topic I've literally written books on. Two books in particular, Mind the Gap, which came out of a master's thesis I did in sociology, looking at different generations, and then one where I applied those concepts specifically to parenting, and a book called Future Proof Your Child. And if you want to read more detail, I'll give you my details later. You can look at my books, other books, lots of stuff online. But the concept of generations, the concept of generational theory, is that in history, we have patterns and cycles of history. The underlying theory is that every 20 years or so, there is a generational shift, typically driven by a particular historical event, something that changes the way that society thinks, the way that society engages, and it changes politics, economics, popular society, and so on. Sometimes you can see it happening in moments. Sometimes you can see and feel that you are in a moment of history changing. Let me give you an example. So on the 5th of June, 1989, some young people on Tiananmen Square in Beijing in China stood in front of tanks of the communist government to try and stop these tanks rolling through Tiananmen Square. And there were protests in China. That was the 5th of June, 1989. The very next morning, on the 6th of June, 1989, the Ayatollah died in Iran. And millions of young people, again, went out onto the streets of Tehran and other cities around Iran to, it was meant to sort of be his funeral, but it turned into chaos and riots, and people thought that there would be another revolution in Iran. So they thought there'd be a revolution in China, they thought there'd be a revolution in Iran. So literally that's within 24 hours of each other. Then, a few weeks later, on the 9th of November, 1989, the Berlin Wall came down, 9/11, if you like, in Europe. And a few days later, Mikhail Gorbachev announced perestroika in Russia and banned the Communist Party in Russia. And a few weeks later, in early February of 1990, Nelson Mandela was released from jail. This is 6 months of world history. North, south, east, west, all over the world, there was this sense of massive, significant change, which was kind of the end of one era and the beginning of the other. When you ask the boomers in the room, if I listed these things and I said to the boomers, when did they happen? Most boomers would kind of think, well, sometime towards the end of the 1980s, into the 1990s. They think it's like a 4 or 5 year period, not realizing it's basically 6 months. I'm just seeing in the chat box, some people are asking, whoa, hang on, Graeme's not sharing his slides. How do I see his screen? All you need to do is just roll over my name if you're in Teams and just say fit to frame or increase the size. But yes, my slides are behind me. So just make sure that you've increased the screen size for me to make sure that I fit. So the point I'm trying to make is that there are moments in history when we actually feel the world changing. And even in the moment, you can recognize, okay, something's happening here. Something big is happening. Sometimes you need to look back and realize, oh, okay, that's when it changed. Let me give you another example, and this one's maybe slightly more subtle. Here's a picture from the 1930s of a group of men sort of standing outside of a job center in the early Great Recession or Great Depression. Point of that picture is to have a look. Every single person is wearing a hat. You might have a grandfather, even to this day, or great-grandfather, who still wears a hat, who will still put on a suit on a Saturday morning to walk down to the shops to buy the newspaper. Wearing a hat for a man was seen as absolutely essential for showing respect and being dignified in public. You would not, it would, for them, if you walked out of the house without a hat, it was as if you were walking out without your trousers today. They just would not do that. And then something happened. And literally, I'm a bit of a history nerd. And you can actually peg it to one day, to one event. It was actually John F. Kennedy's inauguration in 1961. Back in those days, the new president would walk from the White House with the old president and the new president. They would walk from the White House up the Great Boulevard to the Congress and give the inauguration speech. And you can see they're all wearing top hats and coats and everything. And then when John F. Kennedy came out onto that famous balcony, he wasn't wearing a hat. And the crowd behind him didn't know what to do. Some of the men were still left their hats on. Some of the men took their hats off because they thought, well, if the president's taken his hat off, we're going to take our hat off. But honestly, this was like massive news, because how could he do a presidential address without a hat on? But it literally, from that day on, no more hats. And it was done. And he was the first president in America to be born in the new century. And he's the baby boomers' ideal president. You know, he's the picture of the great president that they can remember from their early days. First president born in this century, changed how we see things. Now, let me put that into the Zoomers stage. So our, not Z-U-M-A Zoomers, we're not talking about them. Boomers versus Gen Z. What does that look like today? Well, let's say you say to a young person today, you're going to a job interview. Make sure you wear your best clothes to the job interview. That's what the parent says. And so the parent has this picture in mind. 40 years ago, 50 years ago, they would have had a hat on as well. But now this is what they think. If I give you the instruction to wear your best clothes to the interview, this is what I'm thinking. So then the young person, they 24, 25, a recent graduate, they go and open up their cupboard and they look and they say, what are my best clothes? Well, I mean, one way of thinking what my best clothes are is to say what my most expensive clothes are. So maybe that's what my mom meant. Let me put my most expensive clothes on and go to the interview. And so that's how they pitch up at the interview. And the interviewer, who's a baby boomer, who can still remember the shock and horror of a president not wearing a hat, looks at this person and says, are you even taking your job seriously? And this young person says, can you believe the threads I'm wearing? No, they wouldn't say that. That's what a boomer would say, threads. But I mean, this is the point, right? Is that this person is not showing disrespect for the job. That outfit is probably worth more than that outfit, to be honest. And this is why generational theory fascinates me, because it literally ends up in this kind of stuff, which can cause conflict in the workplace. It can cause conflict in the home, where different generations have different views. Let me show you a bit of the theory. What we're trying to do is understand people's behavior, and even, by the way, influence that behavior if we can. Our behavior is governed by our attitudes. The things we believe, the attitudes that we have, then express themselves in our behavior. Attitudes come from values. Values are things that are deep inside of us that often we don't even realize are there. Not many of us wake up every morning and say, my values are. We wake up and say, what am I going to do today? And how do I feel and what am I thinking? But values are often things that we don't think about or talk about. They're at the very root of our being. And we almost don't evaluate them because it's like the heart of us. It's only when we meet people whose values are different that we realize there might be a values clash. And unfortunately, when you do that on Facebook or Instagram, it tends to end up with capital letter typing and exclamation marks and shouting because maybe I'm talking about some of the older people who are unhappy that other people in the world have different values and we're not really into diversity. Where do these values come from? Well, from everywhere. Your values are largely established by the time you are finished school, by your, even sort of, psychologists will tell us by the middle teenage years. And it comes from everything. It comes from your culture and your ethnic background. It comes from the education that you had. It comes from your socioeconomic background. Your religion plays a part. Personality plays a part. And this is not even a complete list. There are lots and lots of different factors that shape your value system. And then you kind of live with that value system. Yes, you get older, you get hopefully a little bit wiser every year, you learn new things, but largely who you are at age 55 is fairly well established by the time you are 15. It's very few people you meet that you went to school with 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, and you discover that, good grief, you're a completely different person from what I remember at school. It can happen. It can happen for a number of reasons. But in general, our values are established. Now, of course, it's always a danger to generalize about people based on these massive influences. But it's also useful as long as we realize that there is a danger in generalization. We can make it useful. Let me give you an example. Personality, right? So probably the easiest explanation of personality is introvert versus extrovert. And I am an off-the-chart introvert, okay? A 100% introvert. And I know we're not in the same room now, and I'm kind of just presenting via video, but when I'm in the room with people often look at me and they say, you don't look like an introvert. I mean, you look very confident in front of people. You look like you're not shy and everything else. That's a complete misunderstanding of introvert. An introvert is somebody who gets their energy from being alone. I'm confident in front of people. I'm not shy. But I get my energy 100% from being alone. Even being in a virtual room with you is using up my energy. Now, I've got energy and I'm happy to use it up when I'm with you. But after this hour is over, I'm going to need to recover. I'm going to need to have a little bit of downtime, a little bit of breathing room so that I can build my energy up. Lockdown, I've been waiting my whole life for lockdown. It works for me. I'm missing people. So it's not that I don't like people, but gee, I get my energy from being alone. So I'm not feeling drained by being alone. I'm feeling energized. There are other things draining me, but does that make sense? Now, extroverts get their energy from being with people. So, if I was your boss, knowing that I'm an introvert would help you to do a better job of engaging with me. Now, unfortunately, because of the way that we've got, that we set up here, I can't sort of pause at this moment to get your input. Feel free to go to the chat box and just throw in some ideas. What do you think would be a good way, if I was your boss, what would be clever in kind of connecting with me? In getting the best out of it. So you've got a proposal. You want to come and present something to me, and you're hoping that I will say yes to it. So you want to catch me at a good moment and get the best out of me. What would you do in doing that? I'll give you a few moments to pop that into the chat box. Let me give you another example while you're doing that. Gender. Men are from Mars and women are from Venus. It's a complete overgeneralization that just happens to be true, right? It doesn't explain what every woman will do in every circumstance, but it gives us a general idea. If there's a woman I don't really know, and I want to try and guess how she might react to a circumstance, I can use some of those gender stereotypes to guess, to get a general idea. I might discover that the woman I'm dealing with is very different from a typical woman, and then I must respond and react to the individual in front of me. But what gender theory does, what personality theory does, it helps us, if we don't know somebody, it gives us a head start in engaging with them. If we know somebody, we don't need these theories because we know the person, then we treat them as an individual. But if we don't know them, then these sort of things are useful. Let me see, is anybody coming in? None of you are giving me ideas for the introvert. Let me throw a few at you that maybe will make sense. What about you run into my office? I realize this is not a COVID-friendly example, but you kind of kick the door of my office open. You run in with streamers and balloons, boom, boom, making a lot of noise, saying, "Graeme, I've had the greatest idea." So you bring the energy, because I'm an introvert and I don't have the energy for that. Do you think that'll work? I'll tell you the answer is no. You'll freak me out. My energy levels will go vroom, immediately, because I've used up so much energy just looking at your entrance into the room. You think that bringing energy into my space is going to help me. It doesn't. For an introvert, just coming into my space drains me. It doesn't matter how you come in. So you've got to come in. Maybe you've got to send an email in advance. Maybe you've got to message me so you alert me to the fact that you've got something to show me. Let me think about it in advance. Catch me in the morning rather than the afternoon. I've probably got more energy in the morning. Catch me earlier in the week rather than later in the week. Friday afternoon is the worst time for an introvert. You're done. You're done with everything in the week. You'd rather be alone. So again, I'm just giving you examples to show you that, yes, we know that these are generalizations. And when we know an individual, we must treat them as an individual. But these things are valuable for us to understand, especially when we're dealing with somebody we don't know. So this helps us with marketing, it helps us with HR, it helps us with team dynamics. And of course, where I'm going is to say that the era you were born in, which therefore indicates the age you are now, are two hugely important factors to indicate that you might engage with the world. You might respond in different ways to what I am expecting. And that doesn't make the way you respond wrong or bad. It just makes it different. Different generations, people who were born in different eras, experience the world differently and engage with the world in different ways. So if I now go and say to you that kind of every 20 years or so, we have an era shift, a new generation emerges. Then if we say, well, all the people who are in their 50s and 60s, well, let me show you, because we've labeled these people. The silent generation is a label that's used for people who were born sort of between the two world wars and into the Second World War, the so-called silent generation. Then you've got the baby boomers who were born after World War II into the 1960s. And I'm not being very specific there. In the United States, 1968 was one hell of a year. And it led into 1969 with Man on the Moon, but it was John F. Kennedy being assassinated. It was Martin Luther King being assassinated. It was a crazy year, 1968. I think in South Africa, we were slightly behind that change. And I actually think in South Africa, the baby boomer generation goes into the early 1970s. It was the baby boomers who were June 16, 1976. We celebrate next week, or not celebrate really, we commemorate what young activists did and giving their lives even for the struggle. Who were those? They were teenagers in 1976, young teenagers, young people and young adults. They were South Africa's baby boomers, doing what the baby boomers in America had been doing, which is standing up and saying, we're not waiting for the adults anymore. We believe that change must come. Think of the anti-Vietnam protests in America and the civil rights activists in America. That's what was going on in South Africa. And yes, there was a group of silent generation and even older generation called the GI generation. That's Nelson Mandela and all the old comrades of his, the Robben Island guys. They were GI. Then there's the silent generation who are currently leading us, and kind of Cyril Ramaphosa, and that's kind of halfway between silent and boomer. And then you had the Generation X's who were born in South Africa. I think that's the 1970s and 80s children. Born in the 1970s and 80s, that's me as well. We can remember apartheid, but we kind of have done our adulthood after apartheid. So it's a very pragmatic generation. So the baby boomers can remember people landing on the moon here in South Africa, listening to it on the radio. They can remember Martin Luther King, I have a dream. And that defines them. They are a generation that has grand visions. They grew up with rock and roll, and music is that kind of music that their parents were always telling them, turn that stuff down. And that was part of Africa and South Africa's culture as well, civil rights movements, as I've been saying. So who did the baby boomers turn out to be? They are optimistic and idealistic workaholics. If we can think it, we can do it. Nothing will stand in our way. We can do anything. Right now, they're in their 50s and 60s. I call them digital immigrants. I mean, they've got all the latest technologies. They love new gadgets and toys. They don't mind if they've got money or not. They'll go out and buy the new gadgets. They don't mind living on credit. And they're not horrible at it, but they can be a bit frustrating, the way that they use Zoom and Teams and things like that. They need more help than they pretend they need, and they kind of begrudge it when you point out they're not quite using the technology well. But they're not horrible. They're not like the grandparents who are just not into it at all. And probably my favorite point about them is they're not ever going to retire. They'll retread themselves. Some of them have left the business. They went gardening, golfing, and fishing for 3 weeks, and now they're back again as a consultant because they just can't stop. They workaholics. That's the baby boomers, right? Kind of in their 50s and 60s now. The other group who are in leadership in our companies and our world at the moment are Generation X. As I say, born in the 1970s and 80s. And this is a group of young people who grew up with a different view of authority. They grew up saying that the adults don't know what's going on here. The world's falling apart. The 70s and 80s were chaotic times around the world. It was clear that the The adults didn't know what they were talking about. I mean, I went to school at Parktown Boys High, which is just opposite Wits University, right? Just around the corner from where you guys are based. Sorry, I mean, where the Hollard headquarter base is. And, you know, I remember doing bomb drills, right, in high school. So this was mid-1980s, doing bomb drills. And on a Friday afternoon, typically it was Friday afternoon, we'd have a practice what would happen if a Russian MiG aircraft came over and wanted to bomb the school. Nobody ever explained why our school was going to be bombed. And what did we do? Well, we all went and hid under our wooden desks. And as we stared at each other across the floor with our teacher telling us, right, this is a practice for a bomb, we were saying, these wooden desks are going to protect us from a bomb, from a Russian. These adults are crazy. But anyway, hey, it was double Afrikaans, so we were happy to be sitting on the floor under our desks. maybe an advert will summarize better than my words. Have a look at this. Apologies, some of you needed a warning for something like that this early. But yeah, life is short, play more pragmatic generation. Let me just give you a quick problem that Gen X has. Some of them are managers and leaders now, and they prefer to just let people get on with it, to not give much structure, to not kind of tell the team what to do, because they don't want that. So as a Gen Xer, you say, well, I don't want to be micromanaged. I don't want to be told what to do. So you then don't tell your team what to do. Your team are frustrated. Your team are thinking, you're just setting me up to fail here because you're not really giving me any structure or guidance. I don't really know what I'm doing. You think you're doing a great thing as a Gen X leader, but you're actually not, because you're trying to lead other people as if they were all Generation Xers, as if they all had this kind of approach to life, and they don't. So, and I'm running a little bit behind time, but I'm enjoying myself. Let me quickly finish the story, because if we get to the 1990s and 2000s, we get to a generation called the Millennials, born around the turn of the millennium. And let me just show you one thing about them to just help you make sense of them. Back in 2010, when the Millennials started to come into the workplace, there was a magnificent article in the New York Times called "What Is It About the 20-somethings?" Essentially about the millennials. And the author, Robin, she talked about 5 things that you need to do in order to become an independent adult. You need to complete your education. You need to become financially independent. You need to leave home. You need to marry or decide about your marriage, and then have a kid, or decide about starting a family. So those were the 5 things that indicated you had kind of transitioned out of childhood into adulthood, and you'd gone through this sort of young adult period. So then she did some research, and she discovered that in 1960, by the age of 30, 77% of women and 65% of men had done all 5 of these things by the age of 30. I wonder what you think that number was in 2010. That's when she did her research. Again, I wonder, I'm not going to wait this time, but I wonder what you think. I'm sure you think the numbers are less than that, right? That in 2010, by the age of 30, fewer people had made that transition. The millennials are slower in doing these things. Here's what the numbers are now. Well, this is for the millennials, not necessarily now, but for the millennials. 13% of women and only 10% of men have done what previous generations had said, this is how you shift into the adult phase of your life. Now, that doesn't mean that if you're 28 and you're not married, that you're not an adult. It's one definition of looking at independence. But this is part of the issue, right? A lot of this generation are deciding not to marry. A lot of this generation are deciding not to have children. But it's a remarkable difference. And like boomers nearly fall off their chair when they think about this, because they think, well, how do you even live if you're not trying to do these things? Luanda, you're saying, what is adulting? Exactly. The younger generation doesn't use this lens anymore. But of course, their parents and their baby boomer, especially the boomer bosses, do. This then leads us to the Zoomers, to the Gen Z, who are digital natives, who have grown up in a digital world, who have grown up in a generation where they've had a lot more structure to their lives, where their parents have actually done the opposite of what my parents did, which was to be authoritarian and controlling. And they've done differently to what I'm doing as a parent, which is to kind of be hands-off as a more generic exer. And what they've had as parents is helicopter parents, always just hovering over them, always there. I look back at my boomer parents and I can't remember my parents ever coming to watch me play sport or be in the school play. I don't have a picture in my head of my parents kind of supporting me. Like I went to school and they were happy that I did. Today's kids probably never have a picture of their parents not being there. I mean, again, COVID has maybe forced some of that. Although I think for a lot of people right now, they're just saying, COVID be damned, I'm going to watch my kids play sport, and that's why we're in a third wave. Anyway, different story for another day. But these younger generations, let me put this up here. If we've got the boomers and the Gen Xers going through, then you've got these millennials, and then you've got the Zoomers, the Gen Z coming through. Each of these generations experienced a different set of history. And so they bring a different set of values to the workplace. So the Zoomers, these young Gen Zs, are much more pragmatic. They are connectors. They are implementers. I think we're going to discover they come into the workplace having come out of a school environment that was a lot more about group work, a lot more about getting jobs done, teaching them how to work on their own and finish projects. But they need a lot of structure. They need to be told precisely what needs to happen. I mean, my daughters are from this generation. And I remember a few years ago, my oldest daughter was in matric. And for prelims, I thought she should have been studying already. And she wasn't really studying as hard as I thought that she should have been. So I said to her, Amy, why are you not studying as hard as you should? And she said, well, Dad, the teachers haven't given us the scope yet. And I said, what do you mean scope? What's the scope you talk of? Surely you've just got to study everything. And Amy looked at me like I was an idiot. And she said, no, Dad, you don't study everything for the exam. You study what the teachers tell you need to for the exam. So I went in this case, particularly the history teacher, and I said to the history teacher, I said, just explain this to me. And the history teacher said, no, when you were at school, we tested your memory. We tested that you could remember all the things we told you. So you had to study everything. There's too much to study now. So what we do is we teach the kids to think. We teach the kids to engage with the material. And so we don't want them to study everything and remember it. We want them to learn how to think. And that's what they have to show us in the exams. Yeah. Education is different. Popular society is different. Popular culture, politics, economics is different. And that's why even though we might have been living in the same house or experiencing the same school, working at the same office as people older and younger than ourselves, we've actually been living in different worlds. And we need to realize that it's not about right or wrong. It's not who's right and who's wrong. It's about the value of diversity. It's about realizing that different people from different eras see the world in actually very fundamental different ways. It's as different as gender. It's as different as religion. It's as different as culture. And we can get value by seeing the workplace through multiple eyes, because each generation's got positives and negatives, pros and cons. And if we want to work well as a team and get the best out of each other, then we need to take generational differences seriously. In fact, we need to take all types of diversity seriously. But today, let's focus on this generational issue. Okay. I've taken about 5 minutes longer than I was planning to, because we want to get to a panel. So if I can bring our panelists in, we've got Melita, Kamini, Yuri, who else have we got here? Rob, Zintle, and I'm not sure, somebody said, I think, is it just Nolo, but I've got you down as Matlo Gonolo. But please tell me what is the best way to refer to you, and which name you'd prefer to use. But if I can just ask all of you to switch your cameras on, you can stop spotlighting me and just make sure that we can see all of the different speakers. And if all of my panelists will switch your mics on as well if you don't have background noise, then we can all just kind of talk and chat to each other. But I've just got, we want to have a conversation. Let me use a few questions maybe to get into the conversation. Let's maybe start with the baby boomers. So Melita, let's start, if there's some Gen Xers, start with the older guys. Melita, do you find that technology helps you to connect? Or do you feel, I mean, I know you can use technology, I know you can connect with technology, but is your preference for face-to-face? So technologies are like second best, and you'd prefer a face-to-face. Well, how does technology help you or hinder you in connecting?
Yeah, thanks, Graeme. I enjoy, what I like with face-to-face and what I do miss with Teams meetings and the like, especially as most people turn their cameras off these days, is the body language cues that I must say I completely underestimated how much I rely on that, not just a facial expression, but a shift in a chair or, a raised eyebrow or a glance around the room. So I do struggle when I'm not able to pick up on what those are, because I really do rely on those. I'm not sure that that's a generational thing. I think that's
no, Melita, it actually is. Can I ask you another question? It relates to this, and I'll show you how. Would you, let's say you can't meet face to face, would you prefer a phone call or a WhatsApp conversation?
WhatsApp. I hate phones, actually.
Okay, so that's interesting.
Phones hark back to my parents. They loved phones because phones was their tech, They were big on phones. Correct. Everything happened on a phone.
Typically,
and I find phones, quite intrusive, whereas, I like the flexibility that a WhatsApp call gives you. And I also like Teams, because generally those are sort of scheduled meetings as opposed to just sort of bursting into your day like a phone, does.
Okay. And so come in, whoever else is speaking.
It's Warwick here.
Yes, Warwick, go for it.
Yeah, I'm similar to Melita. I miss seeing what people and how they react. I think you can read into a lot more in terms of the person's approach to a subject, if they're defensive, if they're being aggressive. But I'm different to Melita in that I'd prefer a phone call than a WhatsApp, because you can also engage from a person's voice and their tone as to actually how they're feeling about a subject. So for me, a WhatsApp would be, can I call and then give you a call? But I wouldn't have an in-depth business discussion over WhatsApp though.
And I think, so let me, Yuri, you are a new hire here. Welcome to the I2 team. Thank you for being part of our panel. What's your feeling about, say, the difference between a phone call and a WhatsApp? Are you maybe more happy with a text message rather than a conversation? What's your feeling?
Thank you very much, Graeme. I might have been born in the wrong generation, although I'm millennial or Generation Y. I must say one thing, during COVID and kind of losing that human or social touch and engaging with people, I'd much rather jump on a phone call or meet in person and have a discussion than to text back and forth via WhatsApp or social media platform.
And you know, this is proving the point that we were making earlier. These are generalizations. So there's hardly anybody in the business knows you. They kind of know you, a new graduate, new recruit. So they might guess that you'd prefer a WhatsApp. So they start WhatsApping with you because they think, all young people like WhatsApp. We need to be comfortable to push back and say, you know, and you can even make a joke of it. I think I might have been born in the wrong generation. Can we have some coffee? And that's great. Then everybody must just immediately adjust. But what generational theory does is it gives you a starting point, at least a starting point that gives you more likelihood of making a better connection immediately. But it's not true for everybody. It is a generalization. Zinhle, are you there? Can I bring you in and ask you what you feel about technology and which technologies you enjoy most?
Morning, Graeme. Technology. I think for me personally, I prefer, first let me know if you want to give me a call. Don't just call me. I think
yes.
phone calls make me anxious. You never know what's going to happen, what a person wants to say. So I prefer you text me even before you come to my place or prepare, so I can prepare myself. So that's generally me.
Yeah. And I think that's probably a bit of a personality thing, because that would be me as well from an introvert perspective, but it's definitely a generational thing. Young people don't expect phone calls. You know, when the phone rings, especially if it's an unknown caller or something like that, just ignore it. Not even going to answer. They do not feel that Pavlov's dog response to a ringing phone. They're very happy to ignore it. So if you want to do a face-to-face or you want to have a voice-to-voice phone call with a young person, set it up in advance and schedule it. Don't just burst into the office. By the way, when we get back to offices again, if we ever do, there's probably some of these things that can flow into how you manage an office. I'm not entirely sure that millennials and Gen Z love an open plan office. They love an open plan space in the office, but I'm not sure that this massive open plan office is exactly what every young person really wants. Right, let's move on to another question here. And here I want to go to the younger generation and the graduates, because I think there's a huge concern about new joiners, if you like. So juniors and new joiners, if we can use those phrases, that one of the things that is valuable about being in the office together is that you can pick up stuff that's going on around you. Younger generations are very good at multitasking, very good at picking up signals and cues, learning. You know, learning is not something that just happens in the classroom for them. They've been taught to learn in different spaces. And I think it's a whole lot easier to be locked down as an older, more experienced person in the business. I think juniors and new joins at the business, my guess would be that it's quite a struggle to not be in a place where you can just turn to somebody and ask them for a quick bit of input. You know, my generation were told you're not allowed to ask adults questions. You know, when I asked my dad why, he just said, because I said so. So I'm not the type of person who'll just turn to the next person and say, well, how do I do this? Whereas today's young people they've been taught to even interrupt their teachers and say, hang on, can you explain that again? You didn't do that well. They're not getting that experience in the office. Can I bring in the younger people? Kamini, are you with us? What's been your experience as a younger person during lockdown? What have you enjoyed and not enjoyed?
I don't see myself as a younger person.
Oh, sorry. I had you down here. Somebody said you were a millennial. I'm
a millennial. Oh, a millennial is young now. I'm a Senellian with an X.
No, tell us, answer my question anyway. You're kind of falling in between.
I think what you said completely resonates. I mean, for me, I was taught not to ask questions, figure it out for yourself. If you ask a question, it's a big issue. Whereas the people I deal with now, in fact, I had this discussion yesterday, like I wish I could just turn around and ask you rather than have to schedule a Teams meeting about it. So I do see that the younger generation definitely needs a lot of structure, and they need you to be there to guide them. And it's difficult for me to bridge that gap to understand why, because I'm used to just getting on with it, but it makes a lot of sense from the point that you're coming from now. It's a generational issue.
It is. And again, so the point that we're making here is, don't just think that the way I want to do it is going to be the way everybody else wants to do it. That's probably the main message we're going to take away from this hour together.
Yeah. And the way I want to do it the right way. It's not necessarily the right way.
Yeah. And you might have all the best intentions in the world. You might be saying, I want to do the best for my team. Let me think about what the best is. So here's how it's going to be. And then you suddenly realize there's a whole lot of things that young people are saying, what? That doesn't feel great.
Exactly. Yeah.
Michael Gonolo, can I bring you in? And please tell me how to pronounce your name as well if I've got that wrong.
It's Matlho, but you can call me Lolo, Graeme.
Lolo,
Graeme.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Okay, so how's your feeling been?
So I'm also a Gen X, but then the one that falls closer towards the Gen Ys. So I think for me, it's a bit of both, right? So I do love the whole working by yourself, not always having someone to around you to ask something. But when I do get stuck and I do want to ask something and whoever I want to ask is not picking up their phone, I get frustrated, So I kind of almost want an immediate response. So that's why I'm saying a bit of both for me.
Yeah. Let me quickly, thank you for that answer. Let me just quickly throw up something here without going into detail. I mean, this could be an hour-long workshop, but this is kind of some of the wisdom our team has gathered over the years, not just during COVID, but kind of over the last few years, as to how do you get the most out of younger people? And I think the list is fairly self-explanatory, but especially for the Gen Xers and the boomers here. You might be thinking, hang on, this sounds a little bit like hand-holding. Wouldn't young people prefer to just be treated as professionals and get in, and just be told, left alone and get on with their job? If you want to get the most out of younger generations, it's not hand-holding. That's our word for it. I think it's structure and engagement. And so what young people want is constant feedback. They don't want a one-year annual review. Are you joking? We're going to do a review in November and you're going to talk about something I did in February. Why can't we talk about it the day it happens? Why can't we engage with constant feedback? Not formal feedback where we have to take an hour to unpack what I did yesterday, but literally a 2-minute piece of feedback once a week is better than a 1-hour feedback once a year. They want structure, they want guidance. If there's something you want them to do and you want it done in a particular way, well, tell them, give them structure. Coaching and mentoring and the ability to allow them to reverse mentor you is something that they love. Giving them variety in their jobs. A lot of young people just leave their jobs, not because they don't like their employers, they've just got a bit bored. They're used to a lot of change and variety. They want opportunities for advancement and for growth and a sense of contribution. Allow me to contribute to the business. They want a strong company culture. I use 3 words: rituals, rhythms, and routines. are hugely important for young people. Things we do together, like these Fridays. I love that at I2. So I think you're doing a lot right to connect and engage with young people, and then the technology stuff that we've been talking about. We could talk about this stuff for hours. Well, I could anyway. Hopefully you can see I'm passionate about this. We've got a few minutes left. Let me go around everything. Rob, we haven't brought you in yet, and then I'll go to everybody else and ask one final question. If we're looking ahead at what might happen after COVID, right? However long COVID takes to sort out, you're probably in an industry where you might not let everybody work from home forever. I don't think everybody's homes are set up to be the ideal workspace. But I also think it's very clear you don't all have to come back to the office all day, every day. And you certainly don't have to ever experience rush hour traffic. I mean, why the hell we all left home at exactly the same time every morning to get to the office every day? It makes no sense to me at all. So the question is, there's going to be flexibility. Insurance is a beautiful industry to engage with that flexibility from your perspective, and try and represent your generation as we do this. What are some of your thoughts about how to get the best out of a work from anywhere future? Rob, can we start with you and some reflections on that, if you are in the room?
Warwick will answer to that, Graeme. Rob is with us.
I know that Rob was being a good boomer and had about 5 meetings on the go already this morning. So we didn't know if he would join us. Warwick, let's go to you first then.
Yeah, honestly, I have enjoyed working from home. But I go through stages. I find that I can get a lot done in a shorter period of time. But after 2 or 3 days of being in myself, I do need company, and I do need to go into the office and engage with people. I do like face-to-face contact, but the solitude working at home is also, it's not bad. So I'm on the fence. I do like working from home, but going to the office does have its rewards at times as well.
Thank you. Melita, how do you feel?
I like the combination, and I think we've learned so much from being forced to work from home. I mean, I can't believe we never used Teams before. We had it, but we never used it. I'm just interested as to what else we have that we've never used that we might, be forced into using at some point. Maybe we can preempt it. But I like the combination. I love the flexibility that it brings. I find when I do get together, which I do need to do, it's almost like a mini celebration or like a bit of a reunion, which is pretty cool. When you do meet people, you make a real effort because you don't see them every day. But I find I'm a lot more productive at home. If I'm not, I only pretty much have myself to blame most of the time. And I love being able to have a bit more work-life balance, spend more time, if my kids are in their last year at school, and to have lunch with them, which I haven't been able to do through 30 years of working because I had set times. It's just an absolute joy and privilege. So there's a lot of advantages for me.
Perfect. Lolo, okay, sorry, is that Warwick? Yeah, go for it.
The one thing that I have learned through working from home, and I think the greenies out there would love me for this, I don't print anymore. I used to be the world's biggest printer of emails and financial statements and things like that. So I've learned now through tech and just being more savvy about not being able to print, that I've been able and it's just come naturally, and it just took about a month to change.
So boomers can, so here's a message, younger people who are with us today. We've had 2 boomers both saying, hey, technology, wow, we can use it. I'm putting an attitude into your voices that you didn't have. But Melita, your point about saying what other technologies are out there that maybe would do better. Young people hate email. I can tell you they hate email like we used to hate faxes. Email is an outdated technology. And there are many better ways to communicate as a team, to engage message boards and Slack and Monday and so on. So young people, what I'm hearing is take the opportunity to introduce even newer technologies and new ways of connecting and engaging and see what happens. But I am watching the time. I know we're at 10 o'clock. I know some of you might need to go. You've scheduled a 10 o'clock meeting, but if we can take just 4 or 5 minutes, I want to give each panelist just an opportunity to answer this question, and then we're done. So Zintle, can we come to you? Just kind of what's your picture of the next few years?
Well, from being a recent grad, I think it's going to be quite tricky with people coming out of varsity into the workspace, especially because we don't necessarily get that full work environment experience. So you'll find with us, we love being in the office because we want to experience that new environment out of or different from a classroom. So it's quite not really stressful, but it is quite daunting to think, but 2 more months where we are at home trying to learn from people over Teams and calls, whereby if we were in the office, you know, we would get to experience the office culture, experience and get to know more people. So I think it is quite a struggle for us to work from home, having never experienced the work environment.
Yuri, can I come to you? Would you agree with that? What would you add to that?
Yeah, so I'd probably echo what there had to say over there. Just one thing that I would potentially like to add to that. I think the working from home environment has really changed the way kind of input and output is measured. I think we've challenged the stereotype that everyone used to work from 8 until 5 or 8 until 6 each day. And we've stopped measuring people based on the input, but rather on the output that they can provide in lesser time or working remotely or from a different location. So pretty much all I'd like to add to that.
Yuri, that is a point I could speak on for an hour, because I think that's actually the big thing that's coming. I think the work from anywhere thing is quite an easy shift to make in your head. The bigger shift to make is if we are not worried about where you work. So what we say is, what work has to be done and what's the best way to get it done? And then sometimes the answer is from home, sometimes the answer is from the office, sometimes the answer is from a coffee shop. And if that doesn't matter, if we simply go where we need to go, then office hours shouldn't work. It shouldn't be a problem. So if the office is not a necessity, then office hours shouldn't be a necessity either. And if office hours are not a necessity, we shouldn't be counting hours at all. If you take 4 hours to get your job done, and I'm happy that the job is done, we should be all happy. And I think that is one of the biggest shifts about to take place. Yes, Warwick?
Graeme, so following on from that, the concept of annual leave then, if you can work from anywhere.
Sure, exactly.
Is the concept of annual leave going to change?
I think so.
You can go to the coast, work in the mornings, go to the beach in the afternoon, vice versa.
Yeah.
How much annual leave is now applicable?
Agreed. This is, in my mind, Warwick, the single biggest shift. And I think companies like yours can take this seriously. I think it would upgrade your ability to attract and retain top talent like you won't believe if you get this sort of thing right.
We've already got the industry's top talent, so I'm not sure we're going to find.
Yeah, but you want to keep them. You want to keep them. And other people. Thank you, Zintle and Yuri, for that. Very quickly, let's finish. Kamini, you come in, and then Lola, I'll come to you to finish out. Kamini?
Sorry, it's Kamini here.
Kamini,
so I think work from home has given me really a new lease on life. It's given me so much of flexibility, especially in terms of my career. I think I can focus so much better. And also, I mean, technology, these type of meetings, chat boxes, has given me a lot more confidence than sitting in this like kind of intimidating meeting room scenario. So I really feel like through these mediums, I have come out of my shell in being able to articulate it and get my point across much better. And the flexibility issue, I see my kids grow up, I see my dogs every day. So it's great. I love work from home.
What a wonderful way to just reiterate where I was going to end, which is embracing difference. The fact that different people engage in different ways And now this new world gives us new opportunities to help people like you shine in maybe ways that you hadn't before. Thank you for that. Lolo, last word to you, and then we must finish.
Yes, I think for me, Graeme, quickly, it's I love the combination of working from home in the office, and it's changed a lot of how I view things, in the sense that I've always thought to myself, because I wanted to be a present mom and a present wife and everything, I never want to have any career that's in senior management, because I thought it would take up all my time, and because I'll be required to be in the office all the time as opposed to be with the family. But this has actually shown me that you can actually have it all. You can have both, because you can still be able to fit your family in, because you can work from anywhere. So I love it.
Good grief. I wish I was. I think this is actually being recorded. Lola, I might actually come back to you and ask for permission to cut that 30 seconds out and use it somewhere. That is about the best summary of a millennial attitude to the workplace I've heard in a long time. Boomers, listen to that. I didn't want to go to senior leadership. Boomers will be falling off their chair going, what's wrong with you? They might offer you a promotion and you decline the promotion, and the boomers will go, well, she's not committed, you know? So, well, you know, rather leave if you don't want to take the promotion. But you articulated perfectly somebody who says, I know what my life is about, and I don't fit my life in around my work. I fit my work in around my life. And that's one of the biggest differences between boomers and millennials in particular. And millennials are, I find, unbelievably focused on saying, this is what's going to make my life best. And Warwick, this is where I come back to, you know, the issue around talent and attracting talent and retaining talent is about creating life and career paths for younger generations that don't look like the career paths that the older generations were wanting to follow. They don't necessarily just want to be promoted all the way through. They want to earn enough money so that they can live the life they want to live. And they want to work hard enough so they can feel the dignity and joy of work, but not so hard that they never actually live their life. And if we can help younger people to find that balance in the workplace, we'll create a workplace that nobody else can compete with. So we've gone beyond our time, but we're an hour now in our session. I hope you've enjoyed this. Here are my contact details. If you want to connect with me, you can get a copy of the slides I used this morning. If you want to just, if that's a helpful reminder, you want to share this with your team. And follow me, especially on YouTube and LinkedIn. Pretty much every day, every other day, I upload short little videos, insights about the future of work to help people just like you think differently, engage differently with the world. Yesterday, I uploaded a video which asked the question, what happens if the future of the office is no office because of virtual reality? And the use of virtual reality to get the best of both worlds. We want to connect with people. Let's do it in virtual reality. We don't ever have to get into traffic again. So follow me if you want updates like that. We'd love to be connected. And that is it from me this morning. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Graeme. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Graeme.
Thanks, guys.
This actually needed to be a 2-part or a 3-part, I imagine, because the conversation actually is so useful.
So much conversation we could have had. Thank you, everybody.
But at least we have the confidence now to have these conversations amongst each other as colleagues and as families and everything like that. So thank you so much, and we'll be sure to see you online. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Graeme.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Graeme.
Thanks, Timothy.
Thanks, Graeme.
Cheers,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye.
Mamweti,
Yebo.
we did say we need to have a Women's Day discussion with Lolo and all of us that are working from home with kids, and there's tests that are going on in the background and people are asking you for an opinion when you're busy talking to Graeme Codrington and you're like, I'm in a meeting. And husbands that forget that you're in a meeting and they like in phone calls and walk around the house.
Your roommates have no respect.
No, our roommates forget that we share living space.
I mean, at another level, it's so cool. One of the coolest things I've seen in the last year was